something deeply unsettling is unfolding in Hollywood. What started as a contentious legal battle between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni has now escalated into what many are calling a dangerous campaign of retaliation, not just against him but against anyone who dared to talk about it. The line between fair litigation and outright intimidation seems to have vanished as Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds take increasingly aggressive steps to control the narrative. And now the court may be forced to intervene before the damage becomes irreversible. In recent weeks, a wave of subpoenas targeting content creators, independent journalists, and online commentators has stirred a storm of controversy. These weren't casual inquiries. These were legally binding demands for private communications, behind-the-scenes editorial notes, and confidential sources, all aimed at individuals whose only offense was commenting on a public legal matter involving to a list celebrities. To some, this might seem like standard legal maneuvering, but to those on the receiving end, it feels very different. It feels like punishment. It feels like power being used not to seek justice but to silence dissent. And here's where it gets even more alarming. Ryan Reynolds is no longer just the silent spouse standing by Blake's side. Multiple leaked emails suggest that he may have been actively involved in deciding who to target, what to demand, and how far to go in trying to stifle critical voices. This is no longer about legal defense. This is about reputation control and the lengths that the famous and powerful might go to maintain their image, even if it comes at the cost of others' rights. But now the tide may be turning. Justin Baldoni's legal team, led by powerhouse attorney Brian Friedman, has filed an emergency motion, asking the court to step in and stop what they're calling an abusive process. In that motion, they claim these subpoenas are not about gathering evidence but about sending a message that says, if you talk about us, we'll come for you. This urgent plea to the judge could change everything. If the court agrees that Blake and Ryan's legal team crossed a line, we could be witnessing the beginning of a historic ruling that protects creators, journalists, and online voices from being dragged into courtroom battles simply for doing their jobs. But if the court does nothing, then a dangerous precedent may be set, one where the powerful get to use lawsuits not to find the truth but to crush those who speak it. This isn't just a celebrity legal drama anymore. This is about what happens when influence, image, and intimidation collide in the courtroom, and it may determine the future of creator freedom for years to come. Let's break it down. The seeds of this explosive showdown were planted months ago, when Justin Baldoni filed a countersuit against Blake Lively in response to what he claimed was a campaign of defamation and reputational sabotage. The allegations were staggering. According to Baldoni, Lively had engaged in behind-the-scenes smear tactics, selectively leaked private information, and made public-facing statements that directly contradicted her internal communications. When the case hit the public sphere, it became an instant media firestorm. But for many, the most surprising part wasn't the lawsuit itself. It was how quickly things spiraled into retaliation mode. Following Baldoni's legal move, Blake Lively's team went on the offensive. While the legal filings played out in court, something far more aggressive was happening outside of it. That's when the first wave of subpoenas started to hit. These weren't subpoenas aimed at uncovering essential case evidence. They were aimed at YouTubers, podcasters, and independent commentators who had spoken critically about Lively in recent months. One of the earliest to come forward was conservative commentator Candace Owens. In a fiery response video, she revealed that she had been subpoenaed for internal communications related to a single podcast episode where she commented on the lawsuit. "They want my email," she said. "They want my notes. They want to know who I spoke to. For what? Because I told the truth." Shortly after, content creator Andy Signore, known for his in-depth legal and celebrity commentary, posted his own bombshell. He had received a similar subpoena with language that demanded access to private communications about sources, editorial decisions, and unpublished content related to Blake Lively. "This has nothing to do with the facts of their case," Signore said. "This is about scaring people into silence." From there, the dominoes began to fall. One by one, other creators began to speak out. Some shared redacted versions of the subpoenas. Others described vague legal threats or back-channel messages urging them to be careful with their coverage. The pattern was unmistakable and deeply troubling. As this wave of intimidation swept through the creator community, legal analysts began weighing in, and many of them agreed this wasn't standard legal procedure. It looked like retaliation. "Subpoenas are meant to gather relevant evidence," said one First Amendment attorney. "They are not meant to be used as punishment for critical commentary, especially when that commentary is protected speech." What made things even murkier was the involvement of Ryan Reynolds. while initially staying silent, leaked internal communications appeared to suggest that Reynolds had a hand in reviewing and approving certain legal actions. A screenshot of a message allegedly sent from Reynolds' team showed a list of online personalities, marked with comments like "too loud" trending on TikTok and getting attention from press. If verified, these notes would suggest a chilling intent to isolate and intimidate those with the biggest platforms. It didn't take long for journalists to start connecting the dots. Coverage began surfacing in mainstream outlets with headlines like "Blake Lively's legal team targets creators" and "Ryan Reynolds faces backlash over subpoena campaign." As the public became aware of the apparent retaliation effort, the backlash against Blake and Ryan began to grow. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni's legal team was documenting everything. Each subpoena, each media appearance, each backlash wave was being cataloged. The goal to present it all before a judge and argue that the legal process was being weaponized for reputation control, not legitimate discovery. By the end of that first phase, what had started as a private legal matter had exploded into a public free speech war. Subpoenas meant for evidence gathering had become tools of fear, and creators, the people who used their voices to analyze, question, and challenge, were now under fire from some of Hollywood's most powerful names. And the story was just getting started. As court filings continued to trickle in, so did the narratives surrounding them, some filtered through official statements, others interpreted and dissected by independent journalists, legal experts, and content creators. What became increasingly clear, however, was the shift in tone coming from Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' camp. No longer simply defensive, their posture had become reactive and strategic, possibly retaliatory. Multiple legal experts watching the proceedings have noted that Blake's legal filings have taken on a broader scope. What originally appeared as a defamation dispute between Lively and Baldoni now reads more like a multi-layered push for narrative control. And that shift in legal strategy didn't go unnoticed, especially by those receiving sudden, unexpected subpoenas. At least 3 major digital content creators, including legal analysts and social commentators, were reportedly served subpoenas by Blake's legal team within days of each other. These weren't creators directly involved in the case, they were rather observers, vocal ones who had commented critically on developments. The legal logic used to justify their inclusion in discovery remains heavily redacted in the public court docket, but the implications were loud and clear. Comment at your own risk. One anonymous YouTube legal analyst whose channel had published several in-depth critiques of the Lively v. Baldoni lawsuit revealed via a video statement that they had been contacted by lawyers demanding private communication, record source material, and metadata tied to their videos. It's intimidation, the creator said flatly. They're trying to scare people into silence. Ryan Reynolds' involvement only deepened the stakes. Known for his affable persona and strategic branding, Reynolds had largely remained quiet throughout the early stages of Blake's lawsuit, but recent moves suggest that he's taken a far more active role. Behind the scenes, his own legal representatives have reportedly begun coordinating with Blake's, escalating pressure on those speaking out, though Reynolds has not commented publicly on the subpoenas or media criticism. Sources close to the legal process say that his team is reviewing reputational risks posed by the ongoing online discourse. Meanwhile, Baldoni's team has taken a very different approach. Instead of pushing back against commentary, they've leaned into transparency. This is a public case about a public person making public claims, one of Baldoni's legal advisors said in a press briefing, and we welcome scrutiny, not fear it. Public reaction has been equally sharp as news broke of creators being subpoenaed. Hashtags like #StandWithCommentators and #FreeSpeechNotFear began trending. Fans, activists, and legal influencers alike rallied behind the idea that public figures should not be allowed to weaponize litigation to silence commentary. But Lively and Reynolds' legal team pushed back on that narrative in court. In one motion to the judge, they argued that the subpoenas were lawful and necessary to uncover potential sources of misinformation and to understand how private documents might have been leaked or misinterpreted. They framed the subpoenas as fact-finding tools, not intimidation tactics. However, to many legal analysts, the optics were hard to ignore. The sheer number of creators pulled into the litigation, not for their involvement, but for their opinions, sent a troubling message. In one particularly tense courtroom exchange, a judge asked the Lively team whether their strategy risked infringing on First Amendment rights. The response was carefully worded but firm. They respected free speech, they said, but that did not include what they characterized as malicious misrepresentation. The problem, critics argued, is that what constitutes misrepresentation is often subjective, and when celebrities with immense power get to define it, the balance of power shifts dangerously. One high-profile legal analyst put it this way: if Blake and Ryan get away with using the discovery process to go after their critics, it sets a precedent. It says celebrities can fight fire with legal fire, not just against those who harm them, but against anyone who talks about them critically. To make matters even more complex, the subpoenas themselves were issued under the pretense of needing clarity on alleged third-party narrative distortion. But none of the creators subpoenaed were parties to leaks or internal communications. Their only role was commentary. And while Lively's legal camp may have argued that they were within their rights to demand source information, the creators have started lawyering up and pushing back. One prominent creator who had previously covered celebrity trials such as Defamation, Heard, and the Jonathan Majors proceedings filed a motion to quash the subpoena, calling it an egregious misuse of judicial resources. The motion highlighted the broader concern that the judiciary could become a tool not for justice, but for celebrity image management. The judge has not yet ruled on these motions, but sources say pressure is mounting. One court clerk speaking anonymously noted that the volume of filings from Lively's team had increased exponentially, and many of them targeted peripheral actors rather than the core of the case. It's like fighting a wildfire by pouring water on the sky, the clerk said. They're going after everyone except the actual fire. This sprawling approach has created a massive procedural headache for the court. Judges and clerks alike are being forced to triage filings that often blur the line between essential litigation and image control. And while no court document outright accuses Lively or Reynolds of retaliation, the underlying narrative has taken hold. The public sees what's happening, and many aren't buying the justification. At the same time, an urgent plea has reportedly been filed to the presiding judge by an independent coalition of content creators and legal observers. The motion, which is still sealed as of this writing, is believed to request limits on discovery, outreach to non-parties, essentially asking the court to draw a line in the sand. One source familiar with the filing described it as a free speech emergency wrapped in a civil case. If that motion is granted, it could shut down a significant portion of Lively and Reynolds' outreach strategy. It would also mark a rare instance in which a judge explicitly curtails a celebrity's ability to pursue discovery based on reputational arguments. And the implications of such a ruling would ripple far beyond this courtroom. Even major media outlets are starting to pick up the story from a different angle. Coverage has shifted from celebrity gossip to First Amendment discourse. Legal columnists in publications like The Hollywood Reporter and Deadline have warned that the case is beginning to tread dangerous ground. As one editorial put it, the courtroom is not a content moderation bureau. When legal systems are used to chill commentary, everyone loses. And yet, despite mounting pressure, Lively and Reynolds remain silent publicly. Their lawyers continue filing motions, expanding requests, and defending their actions in legalese. But outside that courtroom, the world is watching, and the message is growing louder: you can't silence the internet, not without consequences. The third chapter of this legal and cultural saga pulls back the curtain on how deep the influence game has gone. While the courts deliberate on legal motions and protective orders, behind the scenes, PR operatives, influencer contacts, and even media gatekeepers appear to be aligning themselves to protect the reputations of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. What many assumed was just a courtroom drama has now morphed into a battle for public perception, a battle that many say is being fought with unfair, if not unethical, tactics. In recent weeks, numerous creators, journalists, and even mid-tier legal commentators have reported receiving vague legal warnings, cease and desist threats, or messages urging them to be careful about how they speak on this case. None of these communications are formal enough to constitute defamation counterclaims or harassment lawsuits, but they are intimidating enough to chill free expression. The result: a noticeable silence from accounts that once covered every detail of the Lively v. Baldoni showdown with gusto. The fear is spreading, and that may be exactly what Lively and Reynolds' camp intended. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Multiple experts now argue that Blake and Ryan may be treading dangerously close to violating First Amendment protections, not directly through legal threats, but through patterns of indirect intimidation that seem carefully calibrated to avoid overt legal consequences while achieving the same result. It's a smart strategy, some say. Others argue it's deeply unethical. One entertainment law professor explained it this way: if you're sending threatening-sounding emails or messages that don't technically rise to legal action but still have the effect of discouraging someone from speaking, then you've weaponized ambiguity. that might be legal, but it's morally dubious. In the public arena, the moral component matters just as much, especially when two of Hollywood's most beloved figures are now under scrutiny for how they wield their fame and power. Meanwhile, the counterforce is gathering momentum. Civil rights attorneys have begun weighing in on the matter, suggesting that the environment Lively and Reynolds are fostering could be grounds for a chilling effect lawsuit if it becomes more severe. It's not just about subpoenas anymore, one attorney stated. It's about sending a message to everyone: if you talk, you're next. That's not accountability, that's coercion. And while the legal teams double down on confidentiality and push back against the release of certain court documents, especially those involving leaked text messages between Blake and a now controversial third party, the public's curiosity is only growing. Has the pressure campaign backfired? Public support for creators speaking out continues to surge, and so do questions about why Lively and Reynolds would go to such lengths to silence dissent. Some speculate that there's more at stake than defamation, possibly even unflattering information that hasn't yet surfaced. The aggressive tactics, instead of protecting their image, have started to paint a different picture. Not of victims seeking justice, but of influencers trying to control a narrative that's slipping out of their hands. The strategy behind Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' aggressive legal maneuvering is starting to look more desperate than calculated. What was once perceived as a firm attempt to protect their reputations and limit harmful commentary has begun to appear like a campaign built on fear, silence, and control. And as more details continue to emerge, the public and the media are taking a harder look at what's really happening here. One of the biggest developments has been the reaction from independent creators who were targeted in Blake Lively's now infamous subpoena push. Although the judge has quashed several of those subpoenas and even rejected her team's sanctions request, the emotional and financial toll on those subpoenaed has been significant. These weren't multi-million-dollar media companies with in-house legal teams. These were individuals, journalists, commentators, and YouTubers who suddenly found themselves entangled in a celebrity legal battle that they were only commenting on, not participating in. And yet their public voices were being treated as threats. One creator, whose name has been withheld for privacy reasons, described the experience as a direct message from Hollywood royalty that said, "Know your place." It wasn't just about legal documents. It was the implied message that followed, the unspoken understanding that if you say the wrong thing, your life could be turned upside down. This is what's fueling outrage among digital rights groups, legal analysts, and even some celebrities who are beginning to distance themselves from the Lively Reynolds orbit. The central question being asked now is simple but powerful: is this about defending truth, or is it about punishing critics? A PR miscalculation is also unfolding. Blake and Ryan have always maintained an image of humor, humility, and family-focused sincerity. But that image is now colliding with behind-the-scenes behavior that feels controlling, punitive, and deeply defensive. For the first time in their careers, they are losing control of the narrative, and every attempt to tighten their grip is only making things worse. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni's legal team is pushing forward, and they've started to subtly but clearly highlight the intimidation tactics being employed by the other side. While careful not to turn the case into a publicity circus, they've begun threading the theme of retaliation through legal overreach into their court filings, interviews, and public commentary. Baldoni himself has remained largely silent, except to thank his supporters and quietly express his belief in free speech and independent journalism. But legal insiders say his team is preparing to make a broader argument soon, one that could shift the spotlight back onto the very tactics that have stirred so much controversy. Adding another twist to the unfolding drama is the role of Taylor Swift, whose rumored text messages with Blake Lively have become a focal point in the discovery process. There is now confirmation that at least one judge sees these messages as relevant, and while the content remains sealed, the very fact that they exist and may ultimately be revealed has sent the media into overdrive. In public, Swift has kept her distance, likely aware that involvement in this case could pull her into a vortex of legal entanglement she didn't sign up for. But fans, pundits, and pop culture commentators are connecting the dots, wondering what those messages might say and why they matter so much. The deeper question becomes, if Blake Lively truly has nothing to hide, then why this aggressive, far-reaching attempt to silence critics, shut down creators, and suppress evidence? It's a question that her PR team doesn't seem to have a convincing answer for, and the silence is becoming deafening. As this deeply complex legal and media saga unfolds, one truth becomes glaringly clear: this isn't merely about a defamation claim anymore. What started as a celebrity dispute between Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively has transformed into a multi-layered battle involving free speech, platform accountability, and the ethical limits of celebrity influence. Ryan Reynolds' increasing involvement, the intensified efforts to subpoena and silence creators, and the legal back and forth playing out in court filings all point to a wider strategy. This is about control not just over a legal narrative, but over how that narrative is told, interpreted, and shared across the public sphere. The consequences of this case reach far beyond Hollywood. At the core is a chilling precedent if celebrities, with vast resources and global platforms, can target and legally pressure everyday voices, be they journalists, creators, or commentators, for simply reporting or reacting to newsworthy events. Then the very foundation of open discourse is at risk. The fear is not hypothetical. Real individuals have spoken out. Some have reported receiving threatening legal notices, others have paused coverage entirely. The ripple effect is already here. What's striking is the public's response, rather than deterring interest. The actions taken by Lively and Reynolds seem to be fueling it. Audiences are watching more closely, legal analysts are raising eyebrows. Even some in the entertainment industry are quietly expressing concern, worried that this kind of legal aggression sets a dangerous tone. It's one thing to protect one's name, it's another to try and dominate the very conversation about it. The most recent plea to the judge, an urgent motion filed by Baldoni's legal team, argues that this escalation must be stopped, not just for the sake of their client but for the broader principle of fairness. They've asked the court to step in to place limits on what they describe as retaliatory tactics, designed to intimidate and suppress. Whether or not the judge agrees remains to be seen, but this motion marks a turning point. It's a line in the sand. For Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, the stakes are higher than ever. Their reputations, their credibility, and now their approach to handling criticism are under intense scrutiny. If they succeed in their current strategy, it may embolden others in similar positions to do the same, but if the court rejects these efforts, it may serve as a powerful reminder that influence does not equal impunity, and that justice, transparency, and free expression must remain cornerstones of any public legal battle. This story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. But what happens next may redefine how public figures engage with accountability in the digital age. Will the court shut down what's being called a campaign of retaliation, or will the legal tide favor celebrity power? Either way, the world is watching, and the implications will be lasting.